So you went from North Carolina, now you're in Texas.
Yes.
Now, was there anything specific behind the reasoning for switching locations and what you hope to accomplish in the second season?
It was a very simple. Wilmington was terrific, and the crew was amazing, and the look of the show was beautiful. It was simply the reason that we're setting the show in Texas this year. And almost the entire first half of the season at least, and maybe beyond that, is in Texas. And so we started looking around and we said, maybe we should shoot in Texas. And that's why. And, and it's like, we're spending a lot of time in one town for this show, so some interesting change from season 1 of Revolution. It's Rachel's hometown. Her father, played by Stephen Collins, is a new recurring character this year. Charlie's grandfather. He's awesome, by the way. And he's so cool. And you will forget Seventh Heaven. There's a headline because he's gritty and grouchy and he's awesome. I'm really you guys are gonna get blown away by Stephen Collins, I swear. And so, but we wanted that small town Texas look and the Texas landscape, so that's why we moved.
Other than the father, are there any other recurring characters of new seasons that you're going to be in a new location?
Yeah.
Any other characters you want to?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of new recurring characters, but there's this bounty hunter named Adam who Charlie gets tangled up with, who's real smart ass and very cool. Matt Ross, the guy from Big Love, you remember? And he plays this warlord, where we have these amazing multi-ethnic war clans that are just total savage, like our world's version of barbarians. And this guy Matt Ross plays this character Titus, who is the warlord, and his backstory was he was headmaster of a boys' school when the blackout happened, and he was left with 200 boys 1,000 miles from their home, but he was a dark motherfucker, and he just raised them Lord of the Flies style. and our heroes are up against that, and then there's we bring up these guys from Cuba, these patriots, who we quickly realize, even though they're wearing this kind of American mask, they're not the America we know and love. Something very twisted happened in Guantanamo Bay over the last 15 years, and they're all kind of like Randall, but worse and smarter and more insidious. And so there's agents, their agents. We start to meet some of their characters. So there's that, and then all the returning characters are back, of course, who are still alive, the ones that are still alive. And so it's a really wider and more interesting canvas in season 2.
Well, thanks for the shout out for Cuba because I was born there.
Oh yeah, right on.
So, but I want to ask. It just seems like I've mentioned a few times today. It took a while for you guys to kind of find your groove.
Yeah.
But then when you did find it, it was wow. It was bang.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe me, no one is harder on season 1 than me. I agree with you. I think we had a roller coaster of a season 1 that was actually a real roller coaster for me emotionally. It was without a doubt it was certainly the hardest year of my professional life, and maybe the hardest year of my life. It was so insane trying to figure out the show, and I think it did take us a minute because the first half was find Danny, and then we were in the middle of that when we realized we're holy shit, that story's not going to sustain, and we're we got to find another story, we got to move on. And then we started accelerating our story to all the war, and then there was so much power in the show. And I was watching the last group episodes. I'm like, sure, there's a lot of power in the show without power. Once the drones were falling, we're flying around, and I was watching that episode. I'm like, who am I? And what are we doing? And so I really needed. So I took everything I learned about season 1, which was we have a much more interesting, complicated not indecipherable, but like an unfolding, twisty mystery that we know we can sustain for the season. So like we're not going to rush, we're not going to bump. We can maintain it with a really nice, authoritative, interesting pace, but go back to the basics of what makes the show good, which is it's dangerous and neo-primitive, and everyone should be sweaty and grimy, and not look like they stepped out of an Noxzema commercial, and so we can maintain like what was great, and swords, and not everyone shooting machine guns at each other, and drones, and all that can go away, and so we can return to the basics of what made the show so interesting for me, which was it was swashbuckling and fun, with a more interesting storyline that isn't simply about, hey, do we flip a light switch off or on? Because for me, the show's never about, should we just turn the power on? And this season it's about conspiracies and the soul of America and God and fate and destiny. And our heroes, when they dicked around at the tower, they changed the laws of physics. And so what did they do? And so there's like a much more interesting series of questions that we're asking this year versus last year, which was, should we fight an army and should we turn the power off? And so we needed better questions. And so I think the finale, luckily, we launched all these nukes in the air and we were heading roughly in this direction, but we were able to do a lot of soul searching too and say like, how do we build a better engine that I think will make the returning fans go nuts, and hopefully let a couple lapsed viewers come back and say, all right, they found their groove.
One of the things that fans really have appreciated is the fact that you are answering the questions as you're going.
Yes.
And actually, you're setting up questions, you're answering the questions, and then you're moving on to bigger questions, as opposed to other series that just sort of leave those things
for years
lingering. Yeah. And I know that has driven many people crazy. Can you talk about the fan reaction to the responses that you've provided so far and how you felt?
Generally good, and it's totally my MO. And if anyone knows the way I run a show or how I ran Supernatural, it's like I'll answer the questions. And for me, even all the mysteries and conspiracies we're talking about this year, like the answers start coming and they start unfolding. But they're just interesting and they tease out, and each one leads to a new series of questions. And so I don't like things dangling. I like stories that move for 3 or 4 episodes, then you answer it, and then you go somewhere else, then you answer it, and you just need a structure that can maintain over 22 episodes. So for me, it was like, I was mostly gratified. Like the fact that we answered why the power went out was like kind of a huge swallow, like, oh boy, I hope people buy it. And for the most part, people bought it, and I think they appreciated, certainly, for the record, 20 people can say I love it, and 2 people can say fucking lame, and those are the only 2 comments I remember, which is that's just how it is. But what I love about like this nanotechnology idea is it's limitless about what it means for the world. And like we always meant to say that it was about so much more than they were just keeping the power off. Like programmed properly, these things can do anything. And so you're living in a world that, in all of my endless Star Wars references, you're living in the world where there's a force and it's very real and it can do a lot of things. And so again, to push past whether or not it was just about power to what can this shit do and what happened in the tower and how did we change them and now what are they doing, it becomes a new interesting mystery. So it's just a good example of showrunners shouldn't be afraid to answer questions because they usually lead to more interesting story.
So have you got your season 2 finale sorted out, or?
I have, like, everything's always a cocktail napkin sketch because I'm usually drunk. And so I very much know episode by episode what happens through episode 10, which is the first half of the season. We have like a lot of direction and storyline about what happens in the second half. But you never want to. The secret is you never actually want to fill it in too much because you need to leave room for it to be surprised. Because a writer will come up with a great idea, and so for me it's like how I ran every season of Supernatural and how I run this show, which is like you want a roadmap. You want to you start in LA, you want to go through St. Louis, you want to hit Chicago, and you want to end up in New York. But how you get there and the routes you might take, you don't know. First season, I thought when we were going to get to New York, that's when we find Danny. Turns out we found him a shitload earlier. And so again, season 1 was, then we killed him. And so then season 1 was a much crazier season for me, much more chaotic than I usually like to run, frankly. Much more thinking on my feet. But we're back to a storyline that we know will sustain, and it's nice to find my feet with the show, which is what I think we did.
It sounds like for season 2, you've taken a very interesting world, but a very narrow view of it. And you're just like expanding all new warlords. How does it free yourself?
Yeah, what's great about it was, and I think, and again, I'm very honest about the mistakes I made last year, and I feel like I have a lot to prove for season 2 for me, and I know the show, I'm very proud of the show, but like, I need the show to be better, and so I'm attacking this, I'm attacking this with a lot of aggression about making this show great. And for me, it was like one of the problems with season 1 was we had the focus was too scattered because they were moving from town to town to town to town, from place to place to place to place, but the storyline was too simple because it was Monroe versus Georgia, and then there was this one building in Colorado and we got to go to it. And this year what we really learned is storytelling canvas, really much more of an intimate focus with all of the storylines that I'm talking about, which is like the East Coast is in disarray, these patriots are here, we changed the nature of reality, all of that, but the majority of the show is taking place in one town, and that a town that has borders and that you can focus on and get to know people, this Texas town that they all go back to lick their wounds after the disaster of the finale. And so I think we're really learning, because rather than just always throwing new characters at the audience, like, we're getting to know people, we're digging into characters, we're getting to understand them, they're all revealing interesting secrets and surprises. But then on top of that, all of these very epic storylines are playing out, but they're just playing out in a much more intimate way. So again, I think we're finding the right balances that, frankly, I think last year was a struggle to find.